The draft bill is to regulate the recruitment of foreign nationals in certain economic sectors. Joining me now to talk about this is IFP Chief Whip Naren Singh. Naren, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight. Is it as simple as saying foreigners are not permitted in this sector and that's it? It's just a blanket rule that will be put in place. What about the constitutional considerations and all the other acts that do give a right to foreign nationals who are legal in the country to have a fair legal labor practice?
Firstly, good evening to you, Mr. Mdluli, and good evening to your viewers. No, it's not a simple answer of no foreigners to be employed in South Africa. I think if one, as you correctly stated, looks at the intention of the bill, it's to regulate the recruitment of foreign nationals, particularly in certain sectors. And if I may just explain the background to this legislation that we have proposed, is during the recess period at the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019, before we went back to Parliament, we consult with our constituents on the ground. And in most of those exchanges with people on the ground, we found that the question of unemployment ranked very, very highly amongst their concerns. And they also complained about the fact that many of them who had skills in particular jobs were not being employed, but priority was being given to foreign nationals, and this they expressed as a concern. We looked at the legislation that's currently in place, and we found that government does not have any plan to address this particular issue, and it's really causing tensions in the country, given the very, very high rate of employment. So our private members bill, which is being piloted by Honorable Ms. van der Merwe, aims to regulate certain sectors like the restaurant sector, e-hailing, delivery services, beauty, and other low skills, where there could be a percentage of foreign nationals employed. Yeah. And that is the debate that we want to have during our discussions and public participation. And various options can be proposed by people on the ground, whether it's 80-20, 70-30, 60-40. But I think if we do not address the issue of the millions of unemployed who are capable of being waiters, who are capable of being truck drivers, who are capable of being cab drivers, and to other e-hailing services, and we do not provide them with opportunities to get jobs, and we allow employers to look at foreign nationals who are legally in the country, but who also exploit these foreign nationals with low wages, then we are in for a hard road ahead, and it's a ticking time bomb out there.
Now,
so this is our suggestion.
The Minister of Labour has also said this. It's not something that's particularly new. I mean, when you look at the ongoing unrest in the trucking sector, he's also said maybe we should look at new laws that limit the employment of foreign nationals, not just in the trucking sector, but across the board. But government says the influx of the employment of foreign nationals in the country is not their doing. They're actually blaming the employers because as far as government is concerned, the Employment Services Act of 2014 is an instrument enough that is supposed to regulate the employment of foreigners in the country.
Well, you see, the responsibility of any government around the world is to create a conducive environment for the economy to thrive and for other issues to happen in the country. And government is not actually being decisive in creating this conducive environment which regulates the industry. It's well enough to say, yes, they have provisions in the current legislation, or they intend bringing up provisions, but if there's no enforcement of those provisions, you cannot just blame the employers. I mean, we've got a Department of Labour which is resourced with hundreds of millions of rand. We've got staff in the department, and surely they should be carrying out checks and balances. And let me also say, Mr. Mdluli, that it is from 2018 that the IFP has made these proposals. And it's only recently that some other political parties and even government itself, the Minister of Labour, has reacted to what has been happening on the ground, particularly in the trucking industry. So if government can do something about it, well and good, but we cannot allow the situation to prevail where millions of people who have the skills to be employed in certain sectors are not being employed and preference is being given to others.
Yeah. How does it differ, though? I'm just trying to get a sense of how does it differ from the current legislation? I mean, by his own admission, literally what the minister is saying, well, the employers are not complying, yet there are no sanctions that have been meted out to those employers. So how does this new bill differ from what is already in place, and how will it ensure that the implementation of it is definitely policed and enforced?
See, Mr. Druli, I've been in government now from 1994. And I know any government does not like it when a member of any house proposes a private member's bill. But and they really think it should be government's responsibility to come up with legislation. We feel that this bill is going to prick the conscience of certain people in government to start acting, because those that are suffering are people on the ground. And we had the cannabis bill. I think you're very much aware of that, which was introduced by late Dr. Mario Ambrosini to allow for cannabis to be used for medical purposes. Government did nothing about it, Mr. Mdluli. I think your millions of viewers would know that. It was only when the IFP through Dr. Ambrosini and when he passed it through me that tabled the bill that we were able to negotiate with the ruling party and say, let's come to the party. We will withdraw our private members bill if you as government can introduce legislation, and the rest is history. Today we have legislation, even the courts have ruled on this. So this is to prick the conscience of government to do something. We cannot have this lackadaisical attitude by government in not upholding and promoting laws in this country which would diffuse the kind of situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Could such legislation lead to a claim of unfair discrimination? Because our constitution says that everyone has a right to fair labor practice. But not only that, it doesn't specifically say just South Africans. It says everyone has a right to gain meaningful employment in the country, especially foreign nationals who are legal. So are you not in danger of somebody then taking this and challenging it in court and saying, well, this is unfair discrimination?
Well, it is possible. But what we've done now, we've put this document out. Ms. van der Merwe has put this document out on behalf of the IFP to the South African public. And our intention as the IFP and Parliament's intention will be to canvass opinion across the board, from trade unions, from employers, from ordinary South Africans, and find out what can be a happy medium to ensure that to some extent charity begins at home. If we didn't have an unemployment problem at the rate that we have currently, I mean, then nobody would have been even talking about this. If it's in the scientific sector that we are looking for foreign nationals, well, if there's a shortage of skills in South Africa, let's employ them. But when you are looking at quote unquote menial jobs, jobs that can be done by South African citizens, but they are being overlooked because employers exploit these foreign nationals, pay them low salaries, make them work long hours, then that becomes a problem that government needs to do something about.
Now, how different is this from what the Department of Small Businesses, that minister there, calling for a complete ban in certain sectors? Are you saying in hospitality, in restaurants, in trucking, in driving jobs, a complete ban of the employment of foreign nationals?
No, we're not saying that. We're not saying that, but we're saying that there should be some kind of a regulation. There should be some kind of a happy medium. Like I said in the beginning, you look at a 60-40%, you look at a 70-30, you look at an 80-20, you look at a 90-10. But the scale must fall in favor of South Africans first, and then you employ others. And we're not saying that others should not be employed. Of course, we need to employ them. If you look at the trucking industry, many of the trucks that work in South Africa travel across our borders. And sometimes it becomes necessary for a foreign national from across the country to be driving a truck registered in the South African, in South Africa because of familiarity with the territory. So it's not going to be a one or the other, but it's going to be finding this happy medium. And at the moment, we don't have this. And in the absence of these regulations and talking to each other, like I said, it can be quite catastrophic for us in South Africa.
Yeah, and there are those who will say, Mr. Singh, that this is xenophobia, or at least will fuel xenophobia. What does the IFP say to that?
No, it's far from being xenophobic. It's what it is looking after our citizens first, and then also recognizing that we have people from across our borders that are in South Africa legally, and they should also be given an opportunity to be employed. We cannot, bar them from seeking employment, because then they become the responsibility of the South African social system. So it's far from being xenophobic. It's being practical. If you look at some other countries in Africa, they already have these kinds of measures. Well, Europe is let's leave Europe out, because there you just cannot walk in and get any kind of job at any time. So it's far from being xenophobic. It's being realistic and looking at the situation we find ourselves in many industries.
Now, you mentioned, of course, the fact that this has got to be policed and regulated. Now, I'm sure you're well familiar with this. I don't need to tell you, because it is discussed broadly in Parliament, the employment equity reports that are released year in and year out around the hiring of previously disadvantaged individuals. Companies still not paying attention to those equity requirements, particularly in top positions in the financial services sector, particularly being the culprit. I mean, with all the fines and everything that goes with it, they're just not compliant. How different is this going to be, and how are you going to make sure that the companies actually comply?
Put us in government, and you'll see how we make sure companies comply. Because the government is failing us, Mr. Mjuli and your viewers. We've got some of the best laws in the country. We've got a wonderful constitution. But when it comes to implementation, I think we fall far short of that. And, government has to ensure they comply. Otherwise, we must change the government. And we must get somebody else to be the government, so that they take this matter seriously, because the economy of our country is the bedrock. The bedrock of any country is its economy. It's its ability to ensure that there's economic growth. And you know as well as I do that over the past few years, well, perhaps through COVID and the markets around the world, the economy hasn't been doing well. But we could do much, much better if we have proper labor laws, if we create more opportunities, if we use our CETAs, which are given hundreds of millions of rand, to train people and provide them with relevant skills. Now, we are failing in that regard as well. And we want to be constructive in this and not just criticize government, but to point out to government that a lot more can be done to stimulate our economy by creating a conducive environment for people to get jobs.
Right. Chief Whip of the IFP, Naren Singh, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the Newsfeed Late Night.